welcome everyone. I'm going to call the special meeting of the Ojai City Council and Ojai Planning Commission to order.
Now.
And I'm going to ask Chair Necklin if he can lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, or to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And if we could have a City Council roll call, please.
Councilmember Lara?
Here.
Councilmember Clapp? Here. Councilmember Smith? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Strobel's out of town. Mayor Blatz?
Here. And a roll call for Planning Commission, please.
Commissioner Becker?
Here.
Commissioner Crabtree? Commissioner Foster? Commissioner Nolan? Here. Vice Chair Merck?
Here.
Chair Nicklin?
Yeah.
Welcome. I'm glad we're having another workshop with the Planning Commission. It's always a pleasure. I want to congratulate Lawrence for being the chair. And thanks everyone for being here and the audience as well as the commissioners. The first item on our workshop agenda is a variance request, and Council and the Commission are to discuss variances and findings required for variances. Mr. Clark?
So actually, this is an opportunity for the Planning Commission to share its ideas with you. So I think I'll just turn it over to the Planning Commission and let them handle it the way they want.
Anybody have any comments or questions with regard to variances or the findings that are required for variances that we can discuss?
Well, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, I think Commissioner Crabtree was actually the one that had, he brought up the question at the last meeting where we had a Planning Commission decision that went, I think it was 4-1 or 5-1 against a variance, and then it came to the City Council and it was 5-0 in favor of the variance. And he was kind of concerned that we were getting kind of out of step between the Planning Commission and the City Council.
Okay.
I'd like to say something about that.
Councilwoman Clapp?
I know this was concerning. It was a really interesting situation. And I spoke to a couple of commissioners about it after the fact. And it really brought to my attention the double message that the Planning Commission has been receiving. Because a while back, the council said, we really don't want to see many variances coming before us. And this one had to do with walls. And we had one wall variance we denied. Then we turned around and let another wall variance through that was a very similar situation. So it was a double message that was sent to the Planning Commission. And I really appreciate where you're coming from with that. I don't know where to go with it. Maybe I can open that up to somebody else to help because I really appreciate what your concerns are. Because I think it's really important that somehow we clear that up, that this double message doesn't occur again in the future. Do you want to speak to that, Paul? Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, when you grant variances, and I've had experience in other things, they always have to be very carefully considered because they often come back to bite you. And, I think it's, for a topic this evening, it's a very important topic. And, we approving someone and disapproving another person, and with our joint meeting tonight, I think it's a very strong and valid discussion point.
Just one additional point to be made is that Commissioner Luckman spoke of some sort of seminar she went to. You were there as well, and they talked about variances and how the best way to grant them was, or the problems with them, or could you maybe fill us in on that, because I think that might help us.
Yeah, basically there was a presentation and they addressed variances and basically said, bottom line, it's rare to give out a variance. And then in addition to that, we also had roundtable discussions and variances came up again. And so Commissioner Luckman and myself happened to be sitting with commissioners from 3 or 4 different communities in California, and they started the topic, and we both perked up, But basically, they were saying we rarely give out a variance. And if you look at, I mean, I don't have it right in front of me, so I'm not going to be able to quote it verbatim. But basically, you know, we have a list of criteria which would initiate that you'd want to grant a variance. And basically, it has to do like with the topography, or if there's some sort of a land feature, like say a ravine or a river or something that goes through, then there's, you know, in that case, the property has some physical properties that would allow one or to grant the variance. So it's not just, you know, I want to do it, or somebody sees that a neighbor has done something. You have to meet that criteria. Now, I don't know, maybe down the road we change that, but I think, and I'll speak for myself, the issue that I had was that property clearly didn't meet any of that criteria, but we were given some other information findings, and that property actually came to us not just once, but twice, and both times we denied it because there wasn't enough information, not information, but factual information to grant them the variance. In other words, what was in our findings was that they were notified while the wall was in construction that it was exceeded the height, that it was in the public right-of-way, and they needed to come and get a permit. And they went ahead and continued to build and went forward. So that information is what allowed me to vote the way that I did. I mean, I could understand they had 2 kids, they had a dog, I understand that, it met the matched the neighbor's thing, but I guess the question is, you know, where do we follow what's in the code, or the zoning, or the setbacks, or what have you, or do we just randomly give out? And that's the thing, I'm not disputing what you did, I'm not sure why you did it, or if you had information that we didn't have, that could be part of it. So I think that, to me, that's more, like, we need to be more on the same page.
It's an interesting predicament. And having been both on the Planning Commission and on the City Council, I'll give you a little bit of perspective as I see it. What you guys did was absolutely correct. As a Planning Commission, analyzing the criteria that you have to have, special circumstances or unique situations and things like that, in order to grant the variance, is exactly what your task at hand was. And as far as I'm concerned, you did it well. And if nobody had appealed it to the City Council, it would have stood, and it would have held up, and it would have held up legally. But on the Planning Commission, you operate far more in a box, more so than we do on the City Council. Even though we still have to have certain findings to legally uphold either finding in favor of a variance or not in finding in favor of a variance, we have a little bit of a different calling in that the buck kind of stops with us, and we're accountable to the electorate. And because of that, and we're a legislative body, not just an administrative body, so we have a little bit more of flexibility in the way that we may interpret those findings that we have to make. And a little bit more of broad sphere in having maybe the luxury of being a little bit more subjective in our findings, objective in our findings. Whereas the Planning Commission, I never once felt that when I was on the Planning Commission that I had the leeway to say, well, I don't particularly like this because the code says it has to be this way, and as a Planning Commissioner, we have to say it has to be this way because that's what the code says. Even though I might not like that, I always said that's the way it has to be. So when it gets to us on an appeal, we're looking at it from a little bit different angle. But I wouldn't have wanted you to do anything different in the way that you deliberated over that wall. Yeah.
I think where this kind of falls into, becomes problematic, is the history behind it. The fact that there was 2 experiences. One, the experience was stop, and they continued. Now, I'm not sure whether in the staff report that was in our staff report. It was not in our staff report. This is a problem. And when you don't know the full history, was it? It was. You know, it's a funny thing because I sit into planning commission meetings and I try to sit on them even if I'm not a liaison. Because a lot goes on in planning. A lot goes on in planning that you never really get the full feel of what happened in a staff report. And I think sometimes that puts us at a disadvantage. And I think that it's really important. We have codes for a reason. And they wouldn't be there if they weren't there for a good reason. If they're not there for a good reason, we need to get rid of them. So I don't know, you know, where.
I just think it's very frustrating, and it was for me when I was on the planning commission, because I would literally feel I had to vote one way on a project on the planning commission. Whereas if I hadn't been on the planning commission, I very well could have voted another way. But I felt like I was much more confined in my way of looking at things when I was on the planning commission. And that's hard, because you're on the planning commission and you're stuck with it, and you're doing the best job you can to find these findings, and then to have it come to us, even though it comes to us brand new, it doesn't come to us as an appeal. It comes to us where it's just as though we're the first people to look at it. And then we change and we do something different, because that's not the way we usually do things. We rely on the planning commission as an advisory opinion coming to us when things like that. And we pay attention to what the vote was. But there was something about it that there weren't all the planning commissioners there the night that it was heard the last time. So I can't remember exactly.
You know, I think it'd be important when we have an appeal to come before us like that we take it upon ourselves to look at the planning commission meeting DVD, so that we get a full feel of what's going on. It would really help.
I think that's a good idea.
You know, I think
yeah.
it would be really a good idea. That it's almost obligatory that we do that. Because I think that if I had had a better feel for what was going on, I would have voted much
Although, is there anything wrong with doing that? If it's coming to us de novo?
No, I was just going to mention that as part of any appeal, I always include a summary of the issues in the staff report, and I did note that a stop work order was issued in the staff report. And then I include the minutes of the planning commission meeting, which are detailed enough to give the council a good feel for what the discussion is. And if there's any other issues that I don't feel the minutes have captured, I would expand upon that in the staff report so that you all have the best information to make that decision, because it's a little tough to go through the video. I mean, it's a 2-hour-long meeting, so I try to, at the staff level, get you the information you need.
But that is our responsibility. And appeals, we shouldn't be taking, you know, Kathleen's right, we shouldn't take appeals lightly. Because you
They happen in the course of a year.
Yeah.
Once, twice.
If that.
I think we've only had 2 or 3.
Yeah.
In this case, Chair,
I'll give you Michael.
Council Clapp.
Carol, do you
Yeah.
Michael?
I think in this case, if they happened all the time, but if they only happen once or twice in a year, I think it would behoove us, because I'm a really good reader, and I don't remember reading this. They had come to the desk and had been told about this, so either I missed that, because when I came to council, that was not forefront in my mind.
Just to be clear, they didn't come into the counter, and that was part of the problem. They were told to stop work at the site by our building official.
I had one other comment on it. As planning commissioners, we often, and council members, we have to swallow our pride a lot, and I think that's just something we have to do. We've all done it. We know what it feels like. And, I can swallow my pride on the wall. It's a beautiful wall. It looks great. It matches the neighborhood. I really don't have issues with the wall, but one of the things that I had articulated to the applicant that I had a problem with, I had a discussion via email with Rob when I was in Germany, and that was, did the wall require a permit? And the answer was yes. Was it constructed by a licensed contractor? And the answer was no. So my suggestion was, we need to put that on the variance application. If you violated the law, we shouldn't even be looking at a variance. And by the way, it is the law. I went to Sacramento and I got the big book, and it's the law. And it looks pretty dumb of us to be approving work that's completed by a non-licensed contractor. And it's had, by the way, there's nothing wrong with building something by an owner. But the caveat that comes with owner-builder is what? And it's inspected. It still gets inspected if it's required, to be inspected. So, and again, I love the wall. I think it's fine. I don't really have a problem with it. But what really bothers me is this process. Why, and I love to be flexible. I think some things do deserve variances. And sometimes you can say, well, the rules kind of, yeah, they don't apply to this one. This is a good deal here. But on something like that, it really bothers me. We don't have it in place to protect ourselves. And just had some of these things off. We really never should have been looking at that thing.
You know, I'd have to agree. I think we should have something about that, where if it was constructed with an unlicensed contractor and unpermitted, it was required, that you don't have the remedy of a variance. Is that something we could legally do?
I was just, sorry.
There you are. What are you back there?
No, I think the answer generally is no, we can't.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. So, not only if we have a process in place, an entitlement, the mere fact that someone was out of order, did it out of order, started the work, I don't think takes away the right to seek the approval. In weighing the equities of whether it should be approved or not, and whether the grounds for the justification for the variance exist, you can take into consideration what they knew or didn't know at the time. And then pragmatically, the advice I always give is, if this is going to wind up in a lawsuit, the city's far better off giving someone a hearing, let them make their case, have a due process and a decision that is then reviewed by a court only on whether there's substantial evidence to support your decision, as opposed to them saying, I wasn't allowed even to seek a permit. That's a harder case for us to defend, because the judges go, well, gosh, you wouldn't even give the guy a hearing? Why not? Go give him a hearing. So, you know, while it sometimes can be frustrating when people, you know, I'm not a fan in business or otherwise, and, you know, the philosophy of it's better to ask forgiveness than permission, that is not a good philosophy to do business by or live life by. But we also have to be pragmatic in our role as an agency to make sure that the process has been open and fair and as defensible as possible, because you're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars in attorney's fees defending that lawsuit where the judge says, gosh, just give the guy a hearing. What's the big deal? So you're better off giving them the hearing.
One of the things I pointed out to
then you have a defensible record, much more easily defended.
One of the things that on this particular case, and many of the cases that you're kind of alluding to, would be there is a remedy in it, and the remedy is it's accounted for in case law, which is you build something with a licensed contractor and they screw it up or they build on city property. Guess who's liable? The contractor. And I told this, I said, you know, if you had hired a licensed contractor, because the applicant was complaining about the cost to take out and rebuild the wall. That was a primary reason that they came before us. And I said, if you had this built, and if you'd stopped work, hired a licensed contractor, you wouldn't be here, because the contractor would be required to tear down the wall and rebuild it on your property. So
Right.
they pushed it
That goes
further.
into the equities of the decision. right?
Exactly.
That's-
So it kind of would have self-solved. So I think regardless of that, appreciate your input. We need to ask these questions on these various applications, because you can point it out and say, look, you should stop work. You know, this is a licensed contractor. You need to go back to your contractor and have them come to the planning desk here and we can talk to them.
Rob, let me ask you a question. How does it even get to be in front of us as a variance if they haven't applied for a permit?
No, the applicants did apply for a
That's what I
permit. So
thought.
they were instructed to stop work and come in and get the permits. In this case, it was a variance, and we wanted them to get a survey to determine where the property line was. And it took them a while, but they were able to get that. And then the variance went to the Planning Commission on appeal to the City Council.
Okay. The permit wasn't issued because we said that you needed a variance for it, correct?
There was never a permit application until they were told to stop work, and then they came in for a variance application at that point.
Councilwoman Smith?
Actually, when I read over the report and all, I walked into the council chambers thinking that, well, the ducks are lined up, and this does not look good for the applicant, because number one, as Chair Becker said, they did not hire a licensed contractor, and so the burden would fall to them. But why in the world would you not hire a licensed contractor for a job that's going to cost $25,000? This is such crazy thinking. I mean, how does a homeowner even think about doing that? Do we need to include some education to our public about the dangers that a homeowner faces when they hire somebody without a license? Maybe that would be helpful, but to me, that was a big, what do you call it, knowledge deficit on the part of the homeowners, and I have no idea what the average homeowner thinks out there, because you're quite right, the burden would then have fallen to the licensed contractor, and we really wouldn't have been confronted with that. So I'm wondering how much of our public actually thinks the cost between a licensed and unlicensed contractor is that much, especially when you're dealing with a very high-ticket item like this was. So that did weigh heavily with me, that ignorance is no excuse, or trying to bifurcate the process is no excuse. But somehow in the course of the meeting, the look of the wall, what this went through and all, did soften my thinking on that. And as a council member, I have that allowance to do it. As a planning commissioner, you do not. But that was, I remember, the fact that really bugged me, that they went ahead and spent all this money and they did not hire someone with a license. How dumb can you be?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'm sure the Contractor License Board has something about that, some sort of pamphlet. Maybe we should look into that.
They do. It's even on the.
Yeah, let's get those, and maybe they should be handed out, be in the brochure rack, be handed out at the desk. Benefits or the liabilities of hiring a contractor, a licensed and unlicensed. Then at least we are starting to educate people on that.
And I guess on another note, not to just dwell on this one situation, the wall and signal, we have had other projects come before us asking for a variance. And at our last Planning Commission meeting, we had a discussion about it. And basically where we ended up on the discussion was, and we didn't, of course, finalize it, was we came back to this idea about establishing the neighborhoods and districts, because each one has different characteristics, has different street widths, has sidewalks, doesn't have sidewalks, and maybe the setbacks, because it's an old neighborhood, should be different from another head. Maybe the lighting should be different. And I think that's something that we should pursue as a way to kind of encompass, not just walls, but a lot of different code and zoning issues. And then you also, in that process, are getting information from people that actually live in that neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, it's probably going to be different, and some neighborhoods may be similar because of the existing conditions, but they may vary. And I think, or possibly, this may be a way to alleviate this, who gets a variance, who doesn't get a variance, and some of the issues that we've had to deal with recently.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, I think the wall's beautiful. The other thing we discussed is kind of as part of this whole process is, the wall, you look at the wall and you go, God, it's great, it's really not making a difference. We're probably not going to widen that street. If we do, they'll be responsible for tear it down. There's all these things that would be conditioned to approve it, that the city council would condition the wall. But the other thing is, you know what, how about a little fine? We don't really see the specific reasons, but the wall seems to be okay as long as you agree to this stuff. But it's going to be a $5,000 fine if you really want to leave it alone. And, we don't, I'm not one of those guys that likes the high fees and stuff that we're charging. However, I think people can accept fines when they're deserved. I mean, you go to court, you make a mistake, you get a little fine. It's like, okay, no big deal. But to simply kind of send the message to the community that when you do virtually everything wrong, you can appeal to council and pretty much get a free pass, I don't think it really sends the right message.
Well, I think that they were, how much was it by the time it got to us? Several $1,000s.
For the wall construction?
No, for the
Permitting?
process.
The permitting, if I recall correctly, is about $7,000, including the appeal fees.
I mean, it cost them $7,000 more than it would have if they'd gotten a permit up front. So,
Mayor Platts,
Yes.
may I say something? So I was a liaison to this planning commission meeting, and I definitely respected where all the commissioners came from, especially Commissioner Crabtree. I wish he was here. And at the time, I did bring up at the council meeting why the findings were different. And I really struggled with overturning the appeals, but as a council member, I could see that there was an issue here. I could see that the commission was looking at it more as an ordinance, just like you explained to me that same night, and I accepted that explanation because it made sense. And my biggest thing was, how are we gonna get a message out to the commissioners, or how could we resolve it? And I think Commissioner Becker and Commissioner Nolan kind of touched upon it. Maybe there is an issue with ordinance applied standard over just the whole city, and maybe we should look through districts. So I think that's more of a where I'm coming from, and I really want to convey maybe there is issues, and that maybe that we should look at this a little bit more further. But I do appreciate their comments and their concerns about giving a kind of a double message. So really appreciate that.
And I can't reiterate enough that you guys denying the variance was not wrong. It's not like it came to us and we said, well, the planning commission screwed this one up, we gotta grant. No, that's not it at all. It came to us with me thinking that you guys had done your job very well, and had done your job and denied it. Now it's being appealed to us, and we'll look at it. Whether we agree at the end is nothing to do with whether or not you did your job properly. You did your job properly. In fact, in hindsight, if you had granted the variance, you probably wouldn't have been doing your job properly.
But I think we need to consider the fact that they had a stop order and continued. That is one of the critical.
Well, that's
the tipping point, so to speak, in the whole issue, that I think it takes it to a different level. If they had been given a stop order, planning said no, and they came to us and we'd said yes, that'd be one thing. But it was sort of like this, to the planning commission, and or to the planning department, we're going to go anyway.
But when they came to us,
we've got, there's something that really is uncomfortable to me when people proceed with impunity when they been given a stop order, and it is distasteful that they came to us and they got away with it. And I can see where planning commission's going, come on, you guys, you told us to do a lot of variances, and these guys, blew us off. They blew off the law. We told them to stop. They went along anyway, and now they're complaining that it's costing them so much to move it. There's that other subtle element within there that I think we need to be cognizant of.
I agree
as a
with
planning
that.
commission.
I agree.
And I think we need to take it more seriously in the future. I totally apologize.
all right, we have one speaker's card on this topic. Mr. Quigg, good evening.
I've won variances. Can you imagine what they were for? You're right, it was a sign. It was a restaurant. So the client came to me and said, city told us that we can put a sign here, here, and here, but we got to take that big old roof sign down. And I said, I don't tell you guys how to cook the hamburgers, do I? So don't tell me how to do your sign. You hired me to be your sign painter, not cook your hamburgers. And so I know what sign variances require. And anyway, the effective end result was that it was a 7-zip to approve it from the Planning Commission. It was one of the most unique, and it was an element of the heritage of the city. It was something that was an icon that had been there for decades. You can't go and erase something like that and take it away from a community. I'm here to address this variance request. The one thing that staff needs to do, and if somebody comes in and they want to get a request or a variance, they say, well, here's our process. You pay this money and you take it to the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission's stance is no. It's always no. You depend on it being no. They don't know that. The guy that comes in the door with a handful of money and throws it on the table and says, maybe I'll get a yes. That ain't going to happen. How are you going to get a yes? Staff should supply them, that person seeking the variance. You supply them with a successful variance that has been come through the city of Ojai and give them some idea of what they're up against. Give it to them before they throw the money down. It's unfair. If you have somebody, they think that they're going to get a yes, that they have the option, the possibility of getting one. And the reality is that it's an absolute no. You think I'm being rude about that? It's not. The commission meetings that I've been to, I tried to voice an opinion about some of the issues that were, and they were wholeheartedly, the door was slammed on my input. And to my knowledge, it never has been discussed. That's what I have to say. You should take it and make an attempt to, if somebody comes in for a variance, tell them that they have to have findings that are in their favor, because staff's going to have the findings for denial. But you better have a set of findings that support your point of view and that the Planning Commission can figure out may work. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Any other comments on variance requests before we move on?
Staff, what is your process when somebody comes in requesting a variance? What do you say to them?
I think I'm pretty upfront with applicants that it's a difficult process and that there are special findings that need to be made and that it's expensive and the outcome's uncertain. And that's as best as I can do without going beyond my authority and trying to read the minds of the Planning Commission.
Is there, is there a handout? Is there some sort of, do you say, look at the Muni Code, or
Yeah, we have an application form that has the information that's required. We have a discussion of the findings that are required, and I do take the time to talk to the applicants and make sure that they're aware that this is an uncertain process.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments on variances? All right, number 2 on the agenda, right-of-way survey requirement and option for planning and building permits. Mr. Clark, Mr. Mullane?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I can just quickly summarize the issues that we talked about at the Planning Commission. And the project you're just talking about and a number of other projects that involve work close to the right-of-way or on the right-of-way have been very challenging because we oftentimes don't know exactly where the property is, where the right-of-way ends and where the property doesn't. Applicants are required to provide that as part of their site plan, but I get a lot of pushback from applicants because of the expense, which every year goes up, of getting a survey. So one of the things we were talking about with the Planning Commission is maybe some creative ways to still get a definitive idea of what the property line is that are maybe lesser expensive to applicants. And I think that's some of the thoughts that we've had thus far with the Planning Commission.
Okay. Comments by the Planning Commission?
I think what we did discuss was, typically, if you get a complete survey, depending on the size of the property, the topography, and the different structures and elements, it can be fairly expensive. I know with my line of work, for most of my projects, I ask my clients to get a survey because I need to know basically the same information. But what we were discussing was, depending on the applicant and the project, would it be possible maybe just to define, say, the corners of the property line as they relate to the public right-of-way, and if there are any easements and what have you. Is that correct, or any maybe utilities that would be out there? I guess we would have that information. It'd be more establishing the property line and public right-of-way.
It's one of those issues where there's degrees of issues.
Gray.
If you've got something that's 30 feet back and you're looking down the Ojai Avenue, you kind of know that it's well beyond the property lines. We've had a few cases where we feel pretty confident, we can see it, it looks right, but we don't know for sure, and the pins are underground, so it's been a problem. One of the things we've talked about is providing a list of surveyors that would do corners and kind of how much they charge, because there are people that actually charge substantially less than others that we could provide. And then the other thing is maybe what we do at some point is first maybe talk to particularly along the avenue. It does seem to be a big problem along the avenue. See if Caltrans doesn't have them already marked, or they could mark them for us, or maybe we just do it at some point so we know for a long stretch of the road where these lines are, and it's already done, so the commercial property owners in the corridor don't have to do it. Something like that. We're just kind of brainstorming it.
With the new GIS system, you should be able to do that.
It should, yeah.
And it seems to me that Caltrans would have that. Why wouldn't they have that?
They should have that. It's normal.
Can you just request it from them?
Well, that's the problem.
Requesting it from them.
Of course you can. But if you got someone that wants to do something next month and you request it from Caltrans, it may not take that long. It may take a year.
Get them out of their orange vests and get their shovels out of their hands.
Yeah, we really were just kind of brainstorming it because we want to make it easy for applicants. We actually, quite frankly, we want to make it easier for staff because it becomes convoluted, and when it probably shouldn't be. So.
Well, wouldn't there be a possibility that in certain instances where we kind of think we know where the property line is, but we're not really sure, and you base that on maybe other structures in the vicinity, that you could tell an applicant, look, if you want to be absolutely sure, you're going to have to go to the expense of a survey. If you want to do it where you're proposing to put it, and it looks like you're going to be all right, but there's no guarantee, you have to sign this restriction on your property that says that if you're wrong, then you have to, at some point in the future, move it. The same way we do with variances now if we allow them into the right-of-way. And then they can choose. That may be a way to do it.
I was actually thinking of something along the same lines, that the city could have some information, certain assumptions in place, and we say, if you're here, we're going to accept that as okay. If you're not totally sure, you can do your own survey, but if not, you can build it here, but you take the risk that if you're wrong. But some way to, if it really varies neighborhood by neighborhood, street by street. Some area neighborhoods, it's pretty clear where the property lines or where the right-of-way line is. Others, it's totally unknown, and you probably have to survey. Maybe it's something a check the box on the application process, and we have certain parts of town where we're okay. Yeah, if you put it, at the back of the sidewalk or at the back, whatever we think the right-of-way, that's okay. We're going to accept that without a survey. Other areas we know we have really bad survey data or bad right-of-way data. We're going to say, no, you're going to have to, if you want to build this close to the property line, you're going to have to get a survey. And at least it narrow for the, make it easier, and like Signal Street shouldn't have been hard, for example. You think that would have been an easy place to figure out where the property line, where the right-of-way line is. And so maybe over time also we could budget updating our GIS as we do roll out GIS, maybe update right-of-way data from Caltrans or our own records, maybe that over time we can build a database that's reliable that property owners could use.
Anything else on that? Do you need any direction on that, or do we need to plan on doing something with regard to relaxing the requirements for surveys?
No, I think we'll try to come up with some creative, lower-cost options for applicants, and we'll use a little bit more discretion in terms of what types of applications absolutely need it. But it is difficult, particularly along East Ojai Avenue, where there's a lot of changes in the right-of-way. And because that's a commercial corridor, a lot of people want to be as close as they can to the street, and that creates issues for setbacks, variances, the allowable wall height, and whatnot. And so we'll I think this is good direction from the council and the commission.
A common trespass in these areas is landscaping. A lot of people extend their gardens into
One of my pet ideas would be to build a sidewalk as you leave the farmer's market to the corner of where your business is, is domiciled would be to have a sidewalk straight there. But I look at all the plants and everything that's been moved into the right-of-way as another hazard into what would be that goal. Because it's not that long a strip, but if you look at the properties and where the plants are, it's just in and out with traffic and all. It's really hazardous there, but yeah, it comes in heavy duty.
All right, number 3 on our agenda is fines, procedures and types of violations that should result in fines. Mr. Mullane?
Well, thank you. And again, I think Commissioner Becker introduced this concept that we talked about in the Planning Commission, that right now we do have some fines on the books. They're actually set forth in the annual fee review that was just distributed to the council. And having them on the books and actually utilizing them are two separate things, and there is an issue that the city attorney is going to be looking into in terms of our administrative citation process that needs to be clarified before we go too further. But the fees, the fines that we have set up right now in the fee schedule are pretty modest, and when you're talking a $5,000 fine for somebody building in the right-of-way without a permit, that's not on our books right now.
One of the things that I brought up was, and I don't like to give government too much, ability to hit people with fees that are too high and fines. And I'll be the first one to complain about some of the fees around here. But then on the other case, fines can be used in kind of a positive way. For example, someone screws up legitimately, and they want to be kind of back to zero with the city. Because sometimes if you're the applicant, and I've been the applicant to the city many times, you don't feel like you're back to zero because you made a mistake. You feel like you're kind of at a deficit. Part of it is to say, look, you made a mistake. It's a $50 fine. The slate's clean. Don't worry about it. It won't be held against you. That's our policy. So we're here to help you. So, I like that perspective on a fine. And I think it should be noted that way. Say, hey, you this isn't the end of your, ability to do something in Ojai. You made a mistake. But we also need to acknowledge these things and say, look, you were given a stop work order, and not to pick on the wall, but that does happen quite often. You proceeded to build because your contractor said, well, we can do an as-built on it, and he didn't come check with the city. The city looks at it and goes, well, that's a mess. We should have a fine for that and say, look, okay, your contractor screwed up, you screwed up. There's a minor fine involved. We'll come out, we'll have you cut part of the wall away, look at the rebar, make sure it's cool, and you're on your way. No big deal. You're back to square one. Instead of us taking it as, well, how could you? People make mistakes. Things happen. They do like to know that they're back to square one, and there should be a way to do it. And minimal fines actually kind of make that okay. It's like, okay. And it actually is a source of revenue. We should be getting revenues off of people that are either knowingly or unknowingly violating our codes. And the codes should be another discussion because they are confusing, but once we straighten them up, I think the fines will be more palatable as well.
Any other comments on that?
Just like comment, I think that's an excellent idea. If we could find a way to identify how much to fine people for doing a mistake and then being back to square one, I think that would encourage a lot of people to come in and really not feel like the city is going to really fine them heavily. So,
Question: Is there a fine for proceeding to work even though there's a stop order already on the books?
It's not a line item for that, but that would be a violation of some other failure to get a permit, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Mayor?
Someone mentioned you pay a double fee or something at the Planning Commission. The building permit, you pay double the permit fee or something like that?
That's what I understand from the building staff, and I think Mr. Fletcher had something to add as well.
Earlier on the issue about the fines, just process-wise, one of the issues, the fine is a result of a finding of a violation of the code, and it's issued pursuant to a citation. Normally, when you get these corrective actions, whether they do a stop work and comply or not, the answer is, where they're saying, in lieu of a citation, if you come in and seek an entitlement, if you get it approved, we'll deem you to be in compliance. Therefore, the violation has been corrected. a way to deal with the getting back to zero might be, and rather than going through a citation process on top of the entitlement, might be perhaps to add as a condition of approval, not just the processing cost for the variance, but also enforcement costs. So we could include as an additional condition of approval, besides paying the processing costs, reimbursing the city for its enforcement costs from the time that the citation was identified and the time that the building official, maybe the city attorney, was involved in investigating the violation and getting to that point, and that's a reimbursement of costs. So the city is, basically, there's no profit in not following the rules. That might be the way you could do it, and keep it all in the context of the entitlement process.
Resolve the issue too, because the more you protract it, the more attorney time, the more staff time, the more
Right.
the additional cost is going to escalate, so you're stimulated to resolve the matter. I think that's a great idea. Could we do that? Yeah. How's that sound, Troy?
I think that's great.
Does that work for you?
Works. I think all of our concern is, like, when I hear double the permit fee, that kind of scares me. It's like, whoa, that's a little heavy-handed. As long as it's reasonable, I think that's the good thing. You want the community to kind of go, yeah, that's rational, I get it. That's not too bad.
Yeah. So. And you want to get the word out also before doing this, so that you could have people, their contractor, architects, whoever's out there, know that this is in place to try to avoid any of these retroactive, like, kind of slap in the hand kind of deal. But
Mr. Quigg, you got a comment on this agenda item too?
You're talking about fees and fines and stuff like that?
Yep, you have number 3 down here on your card.
Okay, if I screw up, I owe you money, right?
Yeah.
Generally speaking.
Come on up to the mic so the people at home can hear you.
I just thought I would write that and I didn't have to speak or anything. But
okay.
the point being is that you're talking about fines right now for people that would have erred. How about when you err? How about when staff does something, the blatant mistake? It's a serious issue. I stood before the Planning Commission, and the information that you guys were acting on was so egregious and wrong, and you were making decisions based on it given to you by staff, and I was reacting to it as well. What happens when the staff makes a mistake? This is not being addressed. Excuse me.
Well, I was going to answer your question, I'm sorry.
Pardon me?
I was going to answer
please
your
do.
question. Well, if staff regularly does that, I think their job is on the line. If that's a regular occurrence with a staff member, I think our city manager would keep note of it, and they may not find that they're... That is the grievance that would happen to staff. If staff regularly makes a mistake, they're canceled on it, it happens again, then it's up to our CM to basically fire that staff.
I don't want anybody to lose their job over this. I just want you to realize that it happens. I don't come up here because it's entertainment, and because I'm a sign painter. It's my life, and I've been attacked by it. I'm not trying to lose anybody their job. I work hard enough for the bucks I make. So does staff. But when they mess something up, they shouldn't lose their job for it, but there should be some recognition of it, and then they should be called on it. I don't need to go. I can go into it, and I'd waste a bunch of your time.
Thank you, Alan. Anything more on the fines?
Well, I just wanted to say, and I know council does this, we've actually, in a few cases, recommended to council to waive fees in cases where we thought there was an error, and I think that's appropriate.
And we have. Item number 4, Community Development Department Priorities and Work Plan. Mr. Mullane?
Thank you. This is was really the main item for the discussion tonight. So our time is limited, but the council's getting into the budget cycle to review priorities for the department as well as other departments in the city. And so at their last planning commission meeting, we talked in some detail about what the priorities for the department would be. And I set forth a few of the laundry list of items that have been before staff for the last couple of years. And actually the commission came up with kind of overarching objective or initiative that they felt would really address a lot of the issues all at once. So with that introduction, I'll turn it over to discussion.
Who wants to start?
They're probably looking at me because I opened my big mouth at the last meeting. Really what we kind of discussed, and then since then we've Commissioner Nolan and I have discussed, so please chime in because you can articulate some of this better than I can. You know, the idea of we keep seeing things that come through planning and quite frankly kind of waste our time and aren't really planning issues. They cost staff time, they cost the city time, they're not money really generating anything, revenues or receipts-wise for the city, and it just seems to clog things up. And in my opinion, and I think some of the other commissioners as well, it all gets back to we have to get back into correcting our codes and making them readable and understandable so the community goes, oh, I get that. You only have to look at the sign ordinance or any ordinance, quite frankly, in the city to go, wow. And there's this little bit of distrust that goes on at the planning desk because, you know, it's kind of like, I suppose, being in a courtroom, you can always find an argument to support your case. It doesn't mean you're going to win. So the idea was to take, to work off of something that we've been talking about. There's a real planning thing, which we all are planners, we want to plan, and that is to look at our community as segmented by certain neighborhoods, which has already been accomplished. We've already broken down the neighborhoods through our master tree plan. Is that correct?
Community forest management plan.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
basically we have neighborhoods and districts.
And then to start with one area that we can all kind of work on, that we're all feeling that needs to be done, and we all kind of get it. We already kind of know what's there. We look at fences, setbacks, storage units, zero lot lines, commercial components, all these things. And by the way, when you really think about it, that's a short list, and it doesn't need to be a long list. There's some communities that have form-based codes that are literally 1 or 2 pages long to tell people what they can build and how they can build it and what parts of the lot. Using ideas like that so that when you go to the planning desk, you say, hey, this is where I live or this is where my project is, and there's literally a packet that tells you everything you need to know about what you're doing. Oh, you're going to build a fence and you're in this neighborhood? This is what it's. Oh, you live on the corner. Well, that corner from 20 feet either way, you can't go above 3 feet if you're within 5 feet of the thing. But beyond that, it just spells it out, tells you what the fees are, everything. And what it requires is a rewriting. And one of the things that I brought up, and I don't know if the other commissioners agree, is we really need someone that can write. It doesn't have to have this institutional background so much. We've got a lot of that around here. But someone that can go through with planning commissioners and Rob and really look at these things and just take it and go through it. I was pitching for really having an FTE that really is dedicated to this because every problem we encounter comes back to the same thing, doesn't it? That we're always reading something that we don't understand. And we're getting an interpretation that may or may, is probably correct, but may not be. And so it comes back to what we've already been doing, which is segmenting Ojai, talk about neighborhood planning, all the things that we've been wanting to do for years, so we can stop this endless cycle. And that's basically what it is.
Yeah, I think it's a fabulous idea. And we've already, I mean, I step back and I look at everything that's come through the Planning Commission, like the tree, the smart streets, I mean, the amount of work that you people have done is just incredible. I mean, when you really step back and think about it, and having the neighborhoods all kind of separated in a way that makes sense, I think that that's a really important thing for us to do because Ojai is full of all these neighborhoods, and you can't, and one size doesn't fit all in the neighborhoods. And if anything, Ojai really needs something like that more than any other city because we don't want to be a cookie cutter. So I'm all for that. I would love to see us move towards that.
I think it's going to be a
refinement on all the stuff that's going on right now, the complete streets, and it's just going to tie it into a complete bundle and,
Yeah.
and just.
There's a lot of work that's gone into that.
So my question is, where do we go from here? Because I think we've been talking about it for a while now, so now we've got to do it. We've got to say, okay, we all agree we want neighborhoods. Okay, let's get the neighborhoods, let's do it, let's go forward, so what do we do? How do we do this?
Is that something that we would need to hire a consultant to do, to assist us with?
Well, yeah, it's something that you have to put resources to. I don't think anything that's really meaningful and important can be done without having resources put to it in the terms of help, whether that's a consultant or an employee, and whether it's an existing employee that's taken off something else or a new employee that's brought on in addition. It's all kind of a budget talk. But
Well, my thinking is that it's important enough, and we're in the budget stage, that
Let's get it
if
in.
that's something that we want to do and the resources we need, as much as I don't particularly like hiring consultants, this seems to me it might be one thing that I could support getting some outside help in to help us with.
I'm
Somebody that's
fine.
got some experience with it.
I'm fine with a consultant, but you know what? I really want somebody that understands this town. It sounds xenophobic, but you know what? This is a quirky place. And people, it needs to be somebody that understands the various neighborhoods in this community, because they're all so different.
yeah,
And to
yeah.
bring somebody in from the outside with this institutional understanding of
Yeah.
planning is not going to work for this community. It's got to be somebody that we've drawn from this community, and I can't believe there isn't somebody completely
there may be
capable
somebody.
right here in town that could do
I
it.
was just this is kind of a broad stroke suggestion, because I was actually worked on the community forest management plan. And, basically, we worked on that for years, but I will say that what we did was, and what we based those neighborhoods and districts on, we actually went out and we looked at the public right-of-way. We looked at the street. Is there curb and gutter? I mean, our goal was, planting trees and protecting what's already there. And we were actually an ad hoc committee. We weren't with, although we did have one planning commissioner on our committee. But what we did was we did the bulk of the work, and then we had Katrina actually was the staff member who checked in with us and kind of helped produce the final document. So she wasn't there all the time, but we actually went out and did it. But my suggestion would be for us to take a look at those neighborhoods that we've already developed, see if they in fact will work for this next step, because that may already have been, the work may have been done. We may want to modify it, but, and that would be a start. And then, because I know staffing time's an issue, or if we budget, do we hire someone? And I hear what you're saying about having it kind of in-house, so to speak, in the community. I actually spoke to someone recently, and they had a good suggestion. The Fire Safe Council actually went out into the neighborhoods, and they actually met in the neighborhoods and got feedback from property owners about, it was fire safe issues, but it was very successful and they had a very good turnout. So we could always tap into some other organizations in town that have had success, maybe borrow their template to a degree. And then, and I don't know if this is something we could do at Planning Commission, because I think we mentioned this 2 weeks ago at our last meeting. We said, gee, maybe we could dedicate, I think we said maybe an hour of our time at Planning Commission where we're all there to actually kind of start working on something like this. But I think what we need to do is, because basically we do want feedback from the community, develop either some sort of a matrix or a standard so that when we go out, everybody is given the same information. We've asked the same questions. I'm sure there'll be some variability. But just based on my work with the Community Forest Management Plan and the work that I've been doing with Complete Streets, I think, if push came to shove and we didn't have the money to hire a consultant, we didn't have the budget, and Troy, you said it earlier, do we just not do anything and stay in the same stew that we've been in? Or do we, on our own, take the initiative? Of course, whatever we did would be approved by staff and looked at. I'm just throwing that out there as, a suggestion.
Well, I think it's really important that we move this forward.
I do too, and I think we need somebody to help consolidate everything, because I think you're right. I think a lot of work has already been done, but I think if we don't bring in somebody specifically to harness all that in, herd the cats together, and come up with something, we're going to be just still dragging along in the same mire.
Right.
So the question is council ready to say, okay, let's pull this much money off of paving a street, or this much money off of here? Where do we want to take the money? Where are we going to rob Peter to pay Paul to do this? But I think it really makes sense to get this taken care of, because in the long run, it's going to make the city run more smoothly, waste less staff time, and we'll just have a better community all the way around. So quite frankly, I would like to see us dedicate a part of the budget to it. I have no idea how much that would be. I don't know where we'd have to rob the money from.
Well, we can
We'll
look
have to
into
decide
it.
that tonight.
Yeah,
That's over the next month.
yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately, that we could carry this on for another
Yeah.
2 hours, I'm sure. We're past our limit. All I can say is thank you so much for all your work.
Really.
It
Is there
does
anything
not go
really
unnoticed.
quickly, though, that maybe we've overlooked, that we want to just touch on real quickly?
Anything that
That's
you want to bring
unfinished?
up?
I want to make sure that there's nothing we've left untouched that needs to be addressed.
You know, I think one thing that may be helpful is as you get into the budget and the discussion of priorities for the department, there may be other line items that the council feels strongly have priority, and it might be good to have a couple of the planning commissioners attend those meetings, at least one, so that they
Yes.
can come up to the podium and share their perspective on those items.
Be
Okay,
great.
all
I
right.
like that.
Thank you again for everything.
All right, thanks, you guys.
Stand-